My golden boy brother hired a private investigator to expose me as a failure. Instead, he unearthed my multi-million-dollar success. I grew up in a small village, the middle child between two siblings. In a place where everyone knows each other, that can be both a blessing and a curse. My father is a hardworking man, but his emotions are locked away, like a book he never allows anyone to read. He's thinking about retirement now. My mother, in stark contrast, is a keeper of traditions, a woman whose life has revolved around home and family, shaped by the ideals drilled into her since childhood. Both of them come from deeply religious backgrounds. I love them, but I've always felt like I was a constant disappointment, a misfit in the family narrative they had envisioned. My older brother, however, is the golden child, the pride of the family. Now in his 40s, he has settled into a picture-perfect life with his quiet, submissive wife and two sports-obsessed sons. They gravitate towards the roughest, most aggressive games possible. Watching them makes me wince. He considers it his solemn duty to guide me through life, though his advice feels less like guidance and more like a lecture on everything he deems superior about his own existence. He works as a car salesman at a local dealership, and every conversation with him is peppered with not-so-subtle boasts about his athletic kids, his motorboat, his ATVs, his big house. It's not wisdom, it's a monologue about his achievements, each sentence a veiled insult reminding me of my supposed shortcomings. As a child, I was sensitive, the kid who cried too much and always had an excuse when things didn't go my way. Not strong, not athletic, an outsider. I was laughed at, pushed to the sidelines, never quite fitting in. My asthma only deepened that isolation, yet my parents dismissed it as a minor inconvenience rather than a real condition. And beneath it all, since as far back as I can remember, I've battled something even heavier: depression. School was hell. My grades were mediocre at best. When I scraped by with a 2.5 GPA in high school, no one was surprised. I saved some money, gave college a shot, but dropped out in my sophomore year. That decision ignited yet another firestorm at home. I became a family failure. My younger sister was the princess. I never really got to know her. By the time she was a teenager, I had already left. She's not a bad person, just a little spoiled, playing along with the family's established hierarchy. Maybe because it's easier to mock me than be the target herself. She had the dream wedding at 19 and now has 3 kids. Strangely, I find myself identifying most with her middle child. Maybe it's because she too is a middle child, stuck in the in-between. Maybe it's because I see the same loneliness in her eyes that once haunted mine. After college, I leaned fully into my geeky side. I worked at a comic book and video game store for years, a place I loved until it eventually closed down. Even after I moved away, my parents still talk about me as if I never left that store, as if that job defined my entire existence. But that store was more than just a paycheck. It led me to someone like me, another misfit with enormous ambition. Together, we built an IT support business from the ground up. Years later, we sold it to a major corporation. My partner walked away. I was bought out in cash and stock options. The deal was beyond successful. From there, I invested, started new ventures, made smart moves. Today, my net worth sits comfortably in the millions. And yet, I still live modestly. A cozy 2-bedroom house in a great neighborhood, furnished entirely with second-hand finds. I drive a 15-year-old Saturn. Money has given me freedom, not the need to flaunt it. I'm not in a relationship. My life is busy. I see my therapist regularly. I wrestle with melancholy, asthma, and, to my parents' dismay, alcohol. They dismiss it as a mental problem, something I could just shake off if I really wanted to. Every Sunday, they expect me at family dinner. It's a 2-hour drive each way. Half my weekend swallowed up by an obligation that leaves me feeling hollow. These dinners are endurance tests. 3 hours of unsolicited advice on how to finally grow up. Lectures on marriage, fatherhood, and being a real adult. If I miss one, the guilt trips are endless. My accomplishments mean nothing in their eyes. People back home still whisper that I work at a store that hasn't existed for years. Meanwhile, my brother is the successful one, the mature one, the respected one. I, on the other hand, remain the running joke, the perpetual underdog. They never took my passion for gaming and technology seriously. When I spoke about my work, my brother would cut me off, acting like I was clueless, even though I could dismantle his arguments in a heartbeat. I stayed quiet, afraid that no matter what I said, they wouldn't acknowledge my success. Afraid that proving them wrong wouldn't change the way they saw me. And then, last month, everything changed. My brother, ever the skeptic, decided to dig into my life. He hired a private investigator, someone to do a background check on me. Maybe he expected to find debts, failures, proof that I was as lost as he always believed. Instead, he unearthed the truth, my wealth, my career, the life I built without their validation. The irony is almost poetic. Me, a security expert, blindsided by my own brother's meddling. They weren't ready for what they found. For once, the joke was on them. After making key connections, I traced the source of the hack through alerts about unauthorized attempts to access my credit report. That revelation changed everything. Now, I'm forced to navigate a drastic and unforeseen shift in how my family perceives me. An overwhelming adjustment given our history of miscommunication and underestimation. Fueled by anger over the violation of my privacy, I decided to have the same private investigator scrutinize my brother's finances. The results were damning. He was living beyond his means, drowning in debt. The investigation unearthed files with Child Protective Services, a history of DUI arrests, public intoxication incidents, and domestic disturbance calls. He was juggling 3 mortgages, struggling with IRS payments, and had a credit history in complete disarray. My parents, in contrast, were exactly as I had known, modest and pragmatic with money. Consumed with preparing for our next family dinner, I imagined the fallout, the rift it would cause. So preoccupied was I that I hardly spared a thought for my sister. But when I arrived, the atmosphere was nothing like I had anticipated. My parents treated me with an unsettling reverence, as if overnight I had become the golden child. The shift was jarring, and it clearly enraged my brother. In the middle of dinner, he snapped, desperately trying to reclaim his status. He boasted about his latest commissions, his supposed promotion, grasping at any vestige of superiority. I simply congratulated him and, with carefully measured words, acknowledged his financial struggles, the debt, the IRS issues, the wreckage of his credit. I wasn't outright confrontational, but I didn't shield the truth either. A heavy silence fell over the table. My parents, in exaggerated shock, turned on him, their disappointment ringing loud. But the real gut punch was the realization that the report required my social security number. The extent of their betrayal sickened me. This wasn't just my brother's doing. My entire family had been complicit. Their greed and cowardice were on full display. What followed was an all-out meltdown. Accusations flew across the table. Old grudges and deeply buried family tensions exploded in real time. My father, my brother, and I argued like never before, dredging up every unresolved conflict spanning decades. It was chaos, a twisted spectacle. My sister's husband, my brother's wife, their 5 children, wide-eyed and silent, watched as our family unraveled before them. For once, the usual passive-aggressive jabs about how I should look up to my brother, about how I should be a real man, were absent. Instead, there was only stunned quiet. Yet, as much as I had dreamed of this reckoning, the reality felt hollow. No triumph, no justice, just a deep, unsettling sadness. I had exposed my brother's failures, but at what cost? His children now knew the depths of his mistakes, something I never intended. Then came the breaking point. My brother, eyes burning with rage, screamed at me. "You shouldn't have been born!" The words landed like a punch, but even more shocking was my parents' reaction. Their frantic attempts to placate him were unlike anything I'd ever seen. They never once acknowledged how they had failed me, how they had ignored or excused his abuse for years. Instead, they pinned everything, every past mistake, every family issue, on me. Then, as if grasping for a final, desperate excuse, they accused me of refusing to help a sick niece or nephew. It was a lie. No one had ever told me about a sick child. I suspected they were making it up as they went along, but I didn't even bother to argue. Instead, I let out a quiet, cutting remark. "I thought you believed I still worked at the comic book store." They never seemed to remember that it had closed back in 2011, no matter how many times I reminded them. Their ability to rewrite history to suit their narrative was horrifying. I drove home, heart pounding, mind racing. I felt cheated. Now that they knew about my wealth, I knew exactly what would happen next. I had seen it play out with my brother. Manipulation, guilt-tripping, endless demands. And yet, despite everything, a part of me still felt bound to them. They had clothed me, fed me, given me shelter. I owed them gratitude, didn't I? But did that gratitude outweigh the years of neglect? The dismissal of my pain, the favoritism, the lies? It was a tangled mess of emotions, bitterness, obligation, and the desperate need to set boundaries before they consumed me. I would need my therapist's guidance for what lay ahead. One thing was certain. Growing up, I was never the favorite child. My brother bullied me relentlessly, and my parents stood by, indifferent. The verbal abuse left scars just as deep as any physical wound. For years, I fought to heal, to build a life beyond their shadow. Now, I faced a choice. Stay tangled in their toxic web or finally break free. If I found love, built my own family, what then? Could I ever bring them into my world without risking it all? The questions loomed, but one truth was clear. This was the moment to decide. It was time to move forward, with or without them. Navigating the complexities of family estrangement is never easy. The lingering question that haunts me is, how will I introduce my new family, one I build myself, to the one I have distanced myself from? The uncertainty ahead looms large, and the weight of these unanswered questions presses against me. Before diving into the latest chapter, let me offer a hard-earned piece of advice. If your family never valued you for who you are, if they only kept you around to serve their own egos, and if they now see you as nothing more than a bank account, walk away. You are not defined by them. Their shortcomings are not yours to carry. From everything I've lived through, I can see now that they were the problem, not me. And if you too have endured a family that chipped away at your sense of self, do yourself a favor. Put your phone down, step away, and reclaim your life. You don't owe them your time, your presence, or your money. Seek support where it truly exists. If you haven't already, talk to a lawyer, secure your assets, and take control of your future. Now, the update. The family dinner was a battlefield, and I left it feeling like a survivor of an unseen war. As I sped through the quiet night, streetlights flashing past like memories I wanted to outrun, I knew something had to change. Pulling into my driveway, a single thought crystallized in my mind. I couldn't keep subjecting myself to these dinners, not if I wanted to stay sane. For the next 2 weeks, I poured my energy into work, my mental health, and the small comforts of my world. My home, strewn with the relics of my passions, from comic books to tech gadgets, became my sanctuary. Each item was a reminder of who I was outside of my family's shadow. I increased my therapy sessions, where Dr. Bennett guided me toward building boundaries. Not walls, but a fortress of self-respect. And for the first time in a long time, my thoughts turned toward the future, toward the possibility of love. And then, like something straight out of a comic book, Ava appeared. We met at a tech conference, drawn together not just by mutual interests, but by something deeper. Her presentation on cybersecurity fascinated me, but it was her charisma that truly held my attention. She was brilliant, grounded, and, most importantly, understood the delicate balance of loving family while keeping healthy distance. We spent countless evenings dissecting my tangled history over pizza, strategizing the best way to navigate my return to the family dynamic without falling back into old traps. We devised a plan: brief, controlled interactions, coffee meetups, short and casual, like reconnaissance missions into enemy territory. The first few were predictably tense. My parents were strangely cautious, treating me as if I were a fragile relic they weren't sure how to handle. My brother, on the other hand, wrestled with unspoken words, his usual bravado failing him. The unexpected light in all of this was my sister and her kids. One of them, a middle child who bore a striking resemblance to me, instantly adored Ava. It was a strange, sweet anchor amidst the tension. The short visits worked. My family, sensing that these controlled interactions were the only way to keep me in their lives, begrudgingly adapted. Slowly, they began respecting the boundaries I put in place, and with that, my perspective shifted. I started envisioning a future beyond survival, a future with Ava. We talked about cohabitation, about what it would mean to build a family rooted in love, not obligation. One summer evening, as we walked along a lake, I reflected on how far I had come. Once, I was the castaway, the outsider drowning in resentment. Now, I stood firm, not just surviving, but truly living. The contrast was staggering. The road ahead wasn't without its obstacles, crater-sized potholes, no doubt. But I felt ready to face them. Family dinners still exist, but they happen on my terms now. Some I attend, some I don't. When I do, Ava is by my side, and we tackle any issues as a team. There's progress, but also lingering dysfunction. Because let's face it, family never becomes perfect. The key is finding balance, protecting my peace without closing the door entirely. And so, here I am, learning, growing, and figuring out what my next chapter looks like. If you're reading this and struggling with your own family turmoil, know this: you're not alone. The path forward isn't always clear, but with the right people in your corner, you can carve out a future that's truly yours. At first, Daisy had fought to keep us together. She pleaded, reasoned, even tried to negotiate. But when it became clear that I wouldn't waver in my refusal to open our marriage, something in her changed. She hardened. And that's when things turned ugly. I knew the divorce would be painful, but I hadn't anticipated the extent of her bitterness. The last thing I wanted was for our children to become casualties in our war, but Daisy had other ideas. She began twisting reality, feeding Peach and Mario cruel distortions. "Daddy doesn't love us," she told them. "He wants to ruin our family." Hearing those words, seeing the confusion and pain in Peach's eyes, was like taking a knife to the gut. It wasn't enough for Daisy to move on. She wanted to turn our children against me, and I could feel it working. Peach and Mario now spend most of their time at Daisy's mother's house, where she has moved in with her new partner. Let's call them P. Daisy and P have turned the kids' visits into an endless carnival, brimming with toys, sweets, and late nights. The perfect distraction, the perfect manipulation. We disagree on everything: assets, finances, even the smallest details of daily life. But the most brutal battle is over time. Our time with the kids? Daisy resists every compromise, making it impossible to create a stable arrangement. Worse, she's been poisoning them against me. The other day, Peach asked me, "Do you even like P?" "Why do you ask?" I kept my voice calm, though my stomach twisted. She hesitated before mumbling, "Mario and I think you don't love us as much as P does." That hit me like a sledgehammer. I could see it. Daisy's words had taken root. A few weeks ago, during a chaotic stretch at work, I was logging extra hours in hopes of securing a promotion to homicide investigator. Daisy and I had agreed that during this period, the kids would stay with her during the week and visit me on weekends. When it came time to drop them off, Mario, his small hands clutching his suitcase, looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "Are you sending us away because you hate us?" he choked out. "Like Mommy says." I nearly dropped to my knees. I hugged him, whispering reassurances, but the damage had been done. That lie had already taken root. It didn't matter what I said. He was struggling to believe me. Last weekend, I barely got more than a few words out of them. They were distant, uninterested, as if they were only here out of obligation. And today, when I picked them up, their sadness was impossible to ignore. Peach is torn. I can feel it. She still loves me, but Daisy's influence weighs on her like a heavy chain. And Mario? God, he barely looks at me now. This is destroying them. I'm at a breaking point. Do I continue the divorce, knowing it's pulling my children through hell? Or do I stay, just to shield them from Daisy's manipulations? I know what I should do. I need to fight for them. I need to protect them from this psychological warfare. A commenter once told me, "This is parental alienation." And they were right. This is a battle I can't afford to lose. I need to tell my attorney everything. I need to document every lie, every manipulation. I need to act before it's too late. If you're in my position, if someone is twisting your child's love against you, don't wait. Speak up. Fight back. Get legal help. Get psychological help for your kids. This isn't just a bitter divorce. This is a war for their well-being. I won't stand by and let Daisy rewrite history. And if you're facing the same battle, neither should you. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and click the bell to stay updated with shocking real-life stories happening around you.